support to WHO. Through the Stop TB partnership, Japan supports the provision of innovative diagnostic equipment and drugs to TB endemic countries. In particular, we target to reach and treat children with multi-drug resistant TB. Japan has been also supporting the R&D of medical supplies through initiatives including the Global Health Innovative Technology Fund and UNITE. Last but not least, the government of Japan has been providing approximately $4.1 billion to the Global Fund. As the Global Fund provides 77% of all international financing for TB, we look forward to the continued coordination between the Global Fund and the TB actors to lead the fight against TB at global, regional, national, and community levels, and enhance mitigation efforts to regain lost progress caused by COVID-19. Ladies and gentlemen, this side event was well timed toward the next year's UNGA meeting on TB. Japan co-facilitated the 2018 high-level meeting on TB with Antigua and Barbuda in close coordination with the WHO and Stop TB partnership. We expect that next year's UNGA meeting on TB will be well coordinated and ensure synergies with other health-related high-level meetings, including on universal health coverage and health security. We expect further leadership and coordination by global partners on TB in close collaboration with civil societies. In conclusion, Japan is continuously committed to taking the leading role in global health, including TB, underlying strengthening health systems towards universal health coverage and international society's goal. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hinoshita. We are very appreciative of Japan's leadership, and thank you for sharing the work undertaken both at the national level and the global level, especially on health and on TB and beyond. Very appreciative indeed. So with this, given that we are now coming close to time, we'd like to thank the Honorable Ministers, other distinguished speakers for your powerful interventions. We appreciate your continued support and look to you to your leadership on ending TB. We'd now like to close the session and move to the second session. So thank you very much, distinguished speakers. So now, while we move to the next panel, so just like to note that we have refreshments on the side, so please feel free to grab refreshments as you sit and listen to this very interesting, to the interesting events from distinguished speakers at this event. So now let's move to the second session. We are very pleased to have with us our close partners and leaders to end TB at the global and country level. We have with us Global Fund, Stop TB Partnership, UNITE, and Wellcome Trust. The focus of all distinguished speakers in this panel will be on the contribution towards strengthening and sustaining multisectoral action and progress towards ending TB in the context of the COVID-19 crisis, the new developments, especially looking at R&D research, the new innovations we have in place, how we can push for greater financing, and of course, looking ahead to the second UN high-level meeting. So we've heard from countries, now we look to our partners. So I'd like to invite on the stage Lady Rosalind Morauta, Vice Chair of the Global Fund, Dr. Lichika Ditiu, Executive Director of the Stop TB Partnership, Dr. Philippe Dunetot, Executive Director, UNITE, and Sir Jeremy Farrar, Director, Wellcome Trust. Thank you for being here. we're going to keep this session very interactive, and we're very pleased to have this distinguished list of speakers with us, and we're going to have it more in an interactive Q&A style. So thank you for being here. I'd like to start with Lady Rosalind Morata. Thank you for being here. We are very supportive of and commend Global Fund's seventh replenishment to fight for what counts to defeat HIV, TB, and malaria, end health inequity, and protect humanity from pandemics. This is critical for countries and for the millions suffering and dying from TB, which remains one of the top infectious killers worldwide. How can we leverage the spotlight on increasing health investments to ensure that the TB response is allocated sufficient resources, financing to strengthen efforts to end TB in countries and to close financing gaps? Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I just want to make three quick points. The first is that TB investments work. They deliver results. They save lives. Since the inception of the Global Fund 20 years ago, we've invested $8.5 billion in TB, which is, our Japanese colleague pointed out, almost 80% of all external funding for TB. And in that period, deaths from TB have reduced by 21%. Where are we today? In 2021, in the countries where Global Fund invests, there are 5.3 million people on treatment for TB, 110,000 people on treatment for multi-drug-resistant TB, and 1,600 XDR TB. So clearly these investments do work. And the second point I want to make is the power of partnerships. The results are absolutely an indication of the strength of partnerships between donors, implementing governments, NGOs, communities affected by TB, all working together to design policies and programs, mobilize the resources, find and treat people. It's a very firm position of the Global Fund that it's only through a country-driven, coordinated and multi-sector approach involving all relevant stakeholders in the decision-making process will we continue to save lives and achieve the goal of ending TB by 2030. The involvement of communities in this is critical to ensure a rights-based and gender-responsive TB response, well-mobilized and engaged communities are fundamental. So the Global Fund is investing to support countries to engage community health workers, especially in hardship communities, to find missing people with TB, as well as to administer anti-TB drugs. Another critical element of success is coordination of effort. And I'd especially like to acknowledge our technical partners, the powerful advocacy of the Stop TB Partnership, the support of WHO and other UN agencies, organizations like Welcome, and of course, UNITAID, with whom we work very closely. So partnerships work, investments work, but we need to do much more. The COVID crisis has knocked us back, as previous speakers have acknowledged. The results in 2020 were disturbing, with increased deaths that year and around 1 million fewer people on treatment compared with 2019. And this was the first time in the history of the Global Fund that we saw reversals in progress. We mobilized very quickly to try to respond and to support countries to respond to the COVID crisis by deploying $4.4 billion thanks to additional funding from our donors, particularly the US and Germany, Japan too. And that has allowed us to begin to get back on track. And many countries by 2022 indeed had got back on track. India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, for example. But much more funding is needed. Indeed, a lot more funding is needed. With an $18 billion replenishment, which is our target for the pledging conference tomorrow, funding for TB would increase by approximately 40% compared to the current cycle. The $18 billion will allow us to cut the death rate from HIV, TB and malaria by 64%. It's an astonishing result if we can achieve it. Save 20 million more lives and build a much more healthy and equitable world. For TB, the $18 million would result in a reduction of new TB cases by 27%, from 8.5 million to 6.2 million. It should translate into a reduction in TB deaths, including people co-infection HIV TB, by 59%, from 1.4 million to 570,000 by 2026. But money from the Global Fund, from the replenishment, isn't enough. While we provide almost 80% of external funding, that's very small compared with the amount that national governments are spending on TB. And governments will also need to increase, at the very least, maintain funding for TB. We heard very promising news from the Indonesian and South African and Malawi ministers of their commitment to increasing support for TB. The role of TB partners will be important for advocacy. We need to work together to catalyze the funding. And implementation of the new strategy for Global Fund is absolutely hinged on this. Effective investments, powerful partnerships, and the mobilization of more funding.
Thank you so much, Lady Rosalind. You've really highlighted how the replenishment is really going to make a big difference in efforts to ending TB. And I think we wish us all a very successful replenishment, because it is, for all the work that we do and for the people suffering and dying from TB, it's going to make a big difference. So yeah, we're all rooting for the Global Fund to fight for what counts. I'm now very happy to turn to our close partner, Dr. Ruchika Ditiyu, Executive Director of the Stop TB Partnership. Ruchika, you, at the Stop TB Partnership, you recently highlighted the widening investment gaps in your new Stop TB Global Plan, given new tools and guidelines. What do you see as important actions to close these funding gaps? And of course, Stop TB has been playing a very pivotal role in engaging with communities and civil society. So would appreciate hearing your take on how we can strengthen the role of communities and civil society in boosting investments and actions towards ending TB. Over to you, Ruchika.
So thank you very much, Monica, and we miss Teresa, but I think you are doing very well. So you know, it's life is bringing a lot of challenges ahead of us, but I think it's very important we are all here. I'm very impressed. I was telling Jeremy here, is like kids are left alone because the principals left, but actually it's not true, because the Honorable Minister of South Africa is with us. Remain here. Thank you very much. And I see also the colleagues from US and France as well joining us. You know, sometimes people come and speak. They have a lot of other commitments, I understand, but you feel a bit sad because, you know, there might be some interesting points raised by others, such as this amazing panel. So I'm going to make 3 points. And I want to say we have here the Minister of South Africa. South Africa is a champion on TB for many years. And sir, you pushed and rolled out the tools. You pushed the agenda on R&D. You pushed the agenda on access. There is a lot of burden in South Africa, but you always wrestle with it. So thank you very much for that. But I wanted to, and I wanted to highlight that I have here in front, the team lead from Indonesia for all communicable diseases, Dr. Imran, that what the Minister of Health of Indonesia said something very powerful, and that's what we need to have in a lot of other countries. Because he said, if we saw that during COVID we were able to test 64 million people and find 6 million positive, why we cannot test the TB people expected to have TB, and find in Indonesia 90% of our 900,000 people. And that's the mindset that we need to have. And I know this is not a direct answer to what Monica said, but for all of us here in the room, half of this room are preaching to the choir, if not 60%. We are all in this business of TB for a long time. But we also know very well that unfortunately, a lot of our countries are not making their national strategic plans strong and comprehensive enough to really say, okay, what it will take me to find, diagnose, and put on treatment 90% of all my people. Because that's when the rubber hits the road. That's when it is like, how do I reach my 90% of 1 million cases? How much it will cost? And you know what? Very often our national strategic plans in TB, I heard today that it's a similar situation in HIV as well, actually, is not looking at finding and treating everyone. And Jackie, you had a very good point there that you were going in circles. And that is because we were never funded enough in TB. And people are in a lot of, you know, when you are used to drink water and eat bread at every meal for a life, when somebody says, but you can drink more and you can have some cake and food and some steak, you are like, well, you know what, nah, I'm not sure it's there, okay? So we need to have a call and the pressure that the national strategic plans should be broad enough and ensure that every single citizen has access to the latest recommended tools, to the latest recommended policy that is budgeted. And that is what drives you. And then you go and say, okay, from the Global Fund, and I have to say something about the money there, I'll get something. And I need to put from my domestic as well. And I will remain with a gap, yes, but I have it there and I know, and if a donor is available somewhere, sometime, I come with my request or with the unfunded quality demand for Global Fund. But other than that, if we don't have the plan, we run like chicken without heads in the last moment to put in this kind of plans. Now, why is the situation with the funding for TB so dramatic? It is because the domestic, it is because in TB, the money are coming from three sources. One is domestic. And on the domestic, I agree that the 18 billion obviously is what we need to have at least. But it will not lead us anywhere if it's not paired with a huge increase in the domestic resources. In TB, we expect the domestic to increase 3 times if we want to go anywhere. Without having that, the 18 billion will be great, don't take me wrong, it will save all the lives, but we will not end anything. Huh? We will not end any TB. So, you know, put a cross and say, okay, we defeated. We should not be defeated. So, one part is domestic. Now, on the domestic part, sorry to say, with few exceptions on the African continent, one being South Africa. In the African continent, the domestic money going into the TB response is very low. It's below 10%. I come from a very large country with a high TB burden, which puts just 7% of what is needed in TB from the domestic budget. Basically, 93% in that country is a gap. Ta-da! What can you achieve with a 93% gap? Nothing. It comes Global Fund, which is our second source, as very well Lady Rose and you all know. And Global Fund is putting a lot of money in TB, don't take me wrong. But, and what it is right now is $700 million a year. That's what it is right now from the Global Fund for TB. What is needed is like 5 times more. At 18 billion replenishment, we go from 700 to 1.1 billion. It is indeed a 45% increase, but it's like from one slice of bread to a slice of bread with a little bit of butter. That's what we get. Huh? So with 1.1 billion, we will go a long way because we don't have other money. Again, don't take me wrong, but it's not the answer. Because normally it should be in the Global Fund eligible countries around $4.5 billion. And then we have, and thank you very much to USG, we have some US money, around 300 million a year, that are going as well in this pot. That's all. We don't have the luxury of other donors putting money left and right to build up. That's all. So in the country that I was telling you, had 7% domestic, it came Global Fund and US with another 24%. So that country had 31% of their needs to fight TB. 69% was a gap. If you take a car to go from here to Washington and you put fuel just for a third of the trip, there is no way you reach the destination, right? You will even say, what the fuck, I'm crazy. So you need to find something to fill the 69%, and that's what Monica said. What we do with the 69% gap? I don't know, we push the car, we go by walk, we don't give up. That's the first. But the second is we are smart in doing few things. So what we do is domestic needs to increase, sorry to say that. And I'm sorry, but on the domestic, we are also making a mistake, because if TB goes and fundraise for TB, HIV goes and fundraise for HIV, malaria for malaria, NCDs, the poor ministers of health and ministers of finance will lose their mind. So we need to fundraise for things that will help all the people, and look at what Japan said that it happened there. Let's put in place tools that can help multiplexing, diagnosing more than TB and other diseases. As you heard, for now we can do X-ray with artificial intelligence, you find cancer, you find other diseases, rapid molecular diagnosis, and so on. So one way is domestic needs to increase. The second thing is, can we be innovative? And the Global Fund, and I want to thank as well, is trying, working with World Bank, push and pulled by us, Joanne and other colleagues here, to ensure these buy-downs, in which I think there are, India was part of it, there are conversations with other countries now, in which using the Global Fund money, the loan from the Global Fund, from the World Bank can be paid the interest, and then it becomes attractive for the government. I know that there are other ways to look at these things, I don't want to go into it, but without speaking it openly, and without being very clear what will take to end TB. Stephanie Seytu said something very well. It's in 7 years. By 2030 we should end this. Why don't we walk backwards and say, and we have the global plan for ending TB. I know that 90% of the room has no idea what it is. I encourage you to take a look, because it's actually a fantastic work. It's very well budgeted, and it tells exactly that. How much money you need, and it's a lot of money. It's like 200 billion between now and the end of 2030. But it is what we need to have to put these things in place and what we get there. I want to touch on something, and I'm ending, and Monica, don't give me ever the microphone, on civil society and communities. The civil society and communities, it's very difficult, because in some places, and you heard Vijay Tedros saying we need to put TB into the primary health care. Yes, where primary health care exists, and it's able to do. In a lot of other places, civil society and communities are the ones that are the first front runners. And we were pushing a lot from the Stop TB side on not only having the TB programs that are becoming gender sensitive, respecting the rights of people, inclusive, looking at and embracing the vulnerable groups, but also having them as the frontline providers of care. And in places, because they are the first ones there. And they can be, these investments should not be just for TB, they can do HIV, they can do malaria, they can do NCDs. Create an environment in which these people are the first ones there and are equipped and ready to step in. Ebola came and went left. We don't have too much behind that. If Ebola comes again, we start again from the scratch. COVID learned us something, but I'm not sure we are in the right place. By the way, in many places here in US, ventilation is a disaster. And that's the first thing for airborne. Open the windows, ventilate properly, circulate the air. Anyway, that's a different discussion. I'm trying to say, and some of you might not even follow what I'm saying here. What I'm trying to say, I need to be honest. What I'm trying to say here is this. Without investing smart, the global fund money and the domestic money, in being able to create capacities on the ground with civil society and communities, with primary health care, that are the first ones there, without investing in diagnostics that can serve more than one disease, and without making sure that we plan and we budget interventions that can embrace everyone that is affected with TB, we will never be able to end these diseases by 2030. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ruchika, for your passionate and powerful intervention calling for an increase in much needed investments and for greater engagement of communities and civil society. Much appreciated. I now turn to Dr. Philippe Duneton, Executive Director of UNITAID. We are very appreciative of UNITAID's leadership in advancing research and innovations, notably through investments in scaling up TB detection and in bringing down costs of life-saving tools that you recently announced. Could you please share how UNITAID is leading efforts to harness research and innovations to accelerate the TB response, building on lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic? What can we leverage on globally and nationally to reach NTB targets? Look forward to your perspectives, Philippe.
Thank you. It's always difficult. It's not the first time for me to speak after UNGA. And we met this morning and she said, it's a very serious issue, but let's have some fun. And I think that it's also part of the way to think. UNITAID is about innovation for health, including, of course, TB. TB is one further of our portfolio. It's very important. If you see the panel before us, we had expressed support from France, historical donors, but also new supporters like Japan. We discussed yesterday together about TB. But I think UNITAID is about impact, of course, in terms of public health, innovation. It's about partnership, it's about people. Talking about people, I was really moved by your experience, Shakti, because I think that you nailed it down. I think that your challenges is not only your challenges, it's the day-to-day experience of people coming through diagnostic treatments and of course access overall to care. So it is this in mind that we have really invested in prevention of TB among Asian people in particular because of the pressure of South Africa. South Africa came to us as UNITAID, but us also as a partner with TB, with the Global Fund, by the way, with PEPFAR. So we had the mandate to negotiate with industry to have better drugs, also to develop generic markets. I can take a lot of examples, but I think that's how it works. I was in a panel with the Ministry of Malawi just before, talking about HIV. It was exactly the same. Just to point out, you mentioned new investment, in particular in diagnostic, because the reality is very difficult for people to get access to test. So the fact that we need to, and we are doing that, of course we are colleagues of Global Fund and others, but to have better rapid tests. So that's the agreement, what we have refined in particular to develop that. But also we need to have a way to use the multi-platform disease, because it's very important to diagnose not only TB, hepatitis C, HIV. I mean, it's something, you mentioned it, of course, Ruchika, it's absolutely key. I don't want to be too long, but I think that we mentioned, we know the situation about COVID-19 and the impact it has. So there is a lot of lesson learned, and we should learn, and we should talk about it. And I think that there are three things that, for me, are quite important, and we have been together with Germany and others in that. I think that the question of access is very important, still, for all the tools. And we have been shoulder to shoulder with Peter on that, with Tedros, with UNICEF, to make the point that it's important to have transparency of price, to have an access policy from the pharma industry to allow as soon as possible to have generic markets and also good price for the test. And also to think about what I call not local but continental regional production. So it's part of the question of access for the future. The second point is that we know that we need to do better to work with countries. And I think that's one important thing, and I think of my colleague here, Rodriguez, who say all the time that, I mean, we can make mistakes once, but not twice. I think that it's really important to say, okay, control of infectious disease is always the same. It's when we have a vaccine, you have to use a vaccine that works, but if not, test and treat. So we should not reinvent the wheel all the time. And the last point is, I know there is a lot of discussion about pandemic response, say, preparedness and response, and I'm a little bit anxious, to be honest, because I think that we need to think of response at the same time. An example of that is access to oxygen that was not a priority before COVID, as it is a priority in healthcare. So we organized a response with a specific O2 task force with all colleagues, NGOs on the ground to assess their needs, and then Global Fund and of course USAID can put, of course, the resource, negotiate oxygen liquid that didn't exist. But to be honest, all the ministers I've seen, in particular from Africa, said, please continue because we understand the COVID-19 situation, but we understand the day-to-day issues. And I get this to say, if we want to address pandemic situation, and TB is a pandemic, is an old pandemic because it's an actual pandemic, we need to do better our job together with the country. The day-to-day job needs to improve. That's the only way that we have a change to defeat, of course, with the resource TB, but to face another pandemic that will come at some point.
Thank you so much, Philippe, for that very comprehensive overview of how, through the power of partnerships and innovations, we can really go up to the next level. Very appreciative.
And we need a fully funded global fund, of course.
Maybe we're all echoing this. We need a fully funded global fund, so we're all in this together. So now we're very pleased to have with us our close partner, especially in TB research and development, Sir Jeremy Farrar, Director of the Wellcome Trust. Safe and preventive vaccines are important public health tools, as you all know, to curb disease transmission, improve antimicrobial stewardship, and to avert catastrophic costs. Heads of state in 2018 in the high-level meeting political declaration committed to deliver as soon as possible new, safe, effective, equitable, affordable vaccines. However, unfortunately, no new TB vaccine has been licensed for 100 years, and the further testing of the M72 AS01E vaccine candidate has been delayed due to several challenges. There are very few candidates in the pipeline, and a survey-based report from the Treatment Action Group demonstrates that funding has remained relatively flat for TB vaccine research since 2018. In your perspective, Jeremy, what are the 3 top strategic and scientific priorities for accelerating the development and availability of effective TB vaccines, including drawing on lessons learned from COVID vaccine development that may be prioritized in the upcoming 2023 UN high-level meeting? Over to you.
Thanks very much. I'll say it at the start just to make sure that we need to fund UNITAID, Stop TB and the Global Fund all together. I'll say that at the start just so you want some. Like Philippe, it is really difficult to follow such a panel into individuals, and whether I go before or after, I always have to apologise. If she swears, don't take it personally. It's just part of the way that she is. So if you heard the odd swear word there and the children were in the room, please. And also because the was overrun. So if you do have to leave now, I won't feel embarrassed if people by 3 o'clock are finding meetings. To be serious, I'm yes, now head of Wellcome, but for 20 years lived in Vietnam, where I was a doctor on a day-to-day ward round, and most of my work was actually tuberculosis, tuberculosis HIV, with a particular interest because originally I trained as a neurologist in TB meningitis. We should not forget that actually TB is about more than just the lungs. and it affects adults and children in other parts of the body as well. It is a whole of the body disease and infection, which we should not forget. I also enjoyed your comments. I've not had TB in the sense of being ill with it, but I am one of 25% in this room, probably, that is infected by TB. And we should not forget that amongst us, all of us, including myself, are people who are infected, and were we to get other infections, HIV, or we had needed treatment for cancer, or many others, we could easily become a patient with TB as well. The other thing you mentioned is very typical of a TB patient. They spend a lot of time going through a cycle of different clinics and doctors, maybe because they're in communities where TB is not high on the agenda. That has implications for delaying diagnosis. It also has implications for abuse of other antibiotics. And there is no end to the pandemic of antimicrobial resistance without us resolving the issues around tuberculosis as well. The TB, I think, has a much bigger connotation as well. I think it is, of course, and as an infectious disease doctor, it's about the infection, but it's also about the sort of society that we want to be part of. It is bigger than actually the disease. It is about inequality. It is about poverty. And it is about the neglect of a disease that we have come to accept because it may affect people somewhere else. And the truth is, with a very migrant population, with mass movement happening around the world, the TB is on all our doorsteps as well. It is no longer a disease that you can consider is not part of your communities. All of our communities, and I hold a British passport, all of our communities are becoming more inequitable. All of our borders, some of the highest levels of drug resistance in the world are in Eastern Europe, in Russia. The tragedy unfolding in Ukraine at the moment will make that worse. So TB is in that precarious moment when the COVID pandemic also demonstrated that TB health systems are so vulnerable to anything happening beyond TB that as soon as you put an additional pressure on the system, TB is the one infection that I think goes back the fastest, and we've seen that in the last 2 years. It is also hard scientifically. It's a tough gig to work in TB. It hasn't attracted the brightest and best of the young scientists who have been attracted more, actually, to HIV and malaria over the last 20 or 30 years. And I think part of that is because we've dealt with it, if it translates, as a Cinderella of those big three. It has been neglected, it hasn't attracted the best minds, it hasn't had money, so you don't think you can build a career in a research in tuberculosis. And if we don't attract the bright young scientists, social scientists, biomedical scientists into this field, I don't think we will achieve the warm words that we hear at all of these conferences and continue to hear them. And I don't think, and this is somebody from the TB community, that we have got the right balance between anger, frustration, the voice of people with tuberculosis, but also a sense of hope. I think we've not got that right in ways that we could learn from other conditions about how we have the anger and the frustration that we had during COVID. We had to get there quickly, and we have lost some of that, and we've also lost a sense of hope, and a sense of nihilism has taken over, and I think that's affected the way we see TB. It is a moment, and I think probably for the first time in my career, it's a moment when I think we are at one of those inflection points in history. And it's very difficult to see it when you're at an inflection point in history. You look back in 5 years' time and you think that was when it changed. But actually, the most important is to realise you're in that moment when it's there and seize the day. Because I think for the first time in my research and scientific career and clinical career, I think we are on the verge, within the time frame that we've talked about, of actually making the difference that everybody wants. And I probably would not have said that, say, 5 or 10 years ago. What is that? It's what Philippe does on diagnostics and therapies, shortening therapies, as we heard, making them simpler, non-injectable, and less toxic. I think that's there and will come in the next coming years. It is about vaccines, but it is also about putting vaccines with communities in a way that communities will wish to have and trust to have. If one of the lessons of COVID is just because you have a magic bullet, don't think that communities will accept what you regard as an elite scientist in an elite ivory tower if you don't build the trust with communities before you have the interventions you want. And one of the things I think we need to go away from these sorts of warm conferences in lovely cities, all wearing nice suits and mostly people in ties, We need to work at community level in order to put the research and science that's coming with communities, not to communities. And if we don't do that now, before we have the interventions, don't try and build that trust after you've had the interventions. So I do think this is a moment to seize. I'm the most optimistic. I do believe this decade we will have effective and safe vaccines for tuberculosis, and we should now be planning for that with communities so that if I'm right, we're not then planning how we implement them after we've got them. Let's do that thinking and planning now, and let's put the main lesson to me from COVID, which is if you don't build up issues of access and equity and manufacturing and trust before you make the interventions, you will never deliver the benefits to communities that the interventions will possibly bring. So my request is we treat these lovely rooms and these meetings and warm words with the privilege of being here. But then when we leave here, we don't just treat them as warm words, but individually and collectively in our organisations, we say we are going to change and we're going to seize the day of that inflection moment and commit to doing it when we leave these rooms, not just when we're there wasn't a single swear word in there.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for that very optimistic ending and last word. Very inspiring, and indeed, we need to start working right now with communities, looking ahead, and yes, very optimistic to have new vaccines this decade if we all work together as one. So thank you for that. So we've come to the close of this session. We were really hoping to have an opportunity to get questions from you all, but we've hit the mark. So without further ado, I'd like to thank the distinguished panelists from among our partners. They have covered all the key issues, including on what we need to prioritize looking ahead at the UN high-level meeting. So with that, we'd like to close this panel discussion with deepest gratitude and thanks. And we move now, so please stay on for just 5 minutes for the closing remarks. So many thanks to our panelists. So we are now at the closing session, and for the closing remarks, I'd like to invite Dr. Maxi Rain Rondovunu, Director General of Prevention and Disease Control, Ministry of Health of Indonesia.
Thank you, Monica. Distinguished guests and colleagues, I express my sincere gratitude for the support and keep bringing TB into the spotlight and higher attention. Today, Indonesia and WHO co-host the UN General Assembly, high-level scientific progress and multisectoral action towards achieving global target 20. This high-level side event bringing together everyone to discuss progress towards global target, ongoing effort to advance multi-sector action and accountability and preparation for the 2023 UN high-level meeting on TB. Efforts have been done by government of Indonesia to establish a strong commitment. As Indonesia held the 2022 G20 presidency, we put spotlight on the TB and build on the outcome of our side event on TB, call to action on financing the TB response. The call to action sought to promote adequate and sustainable financing for the TB response and TB research through multilateral, bilateral, and domestic mechanism of focus will also be placed on intensifying TB research and development notably for new TB vaccine leveraging lesson from the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We also have a presidential decree number 67 year 2021 on the TB control and prevention, and a very high political commitment from our president to ensure all the stakeholders, line ministers, and partners are together to reach the target to end TB by 2030. I am pleased that this conference took up the challenge for us, not only focus on the corrective effort as the TB elimination progress, but also generate ideas of how a multi-sector approach with cross-sector stakeholders could create a better environment for TB prevention effort and accelerate the target and to end TB. I do hope that with multi-sector effort, we could address the challenge that lie ahead and create a better environment to enable the acceleration. I wish to take this opportunity to thank Minister of Health and other ministers, head of agency, researcher, private sector, development partner, and civil society for your never-ending and tireless support. I encourage all to keep working together and find most effective and efficient steps by improving the vaccine, therapeutic, and diagnostic tool. I thank you and wish you safe travel back home to again take up the challenge of ending TB in our lifetime.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maxine Rundubunu. On behalf of the World Health Organization, especially Dr. Teresa Kasaiva, Director of WHO's Global Tuberculosis Program, who couldn't be with us here today, we would like to thank the government of Indonesia for co-hosting this event with us, notably the Honorable Minister and Dr. Tedros from WHO and our other colleagues. We would like to thank our eminent speakers, both from ministers and from partner agencies and from civil society. Thank you, Jackie, for sharing your story and for your powerful call to action. Thank you to you, our wonderful audience. It's a very busy UNGA week, and we appreciate you making time to prioritize ending TB. It's amazing to see a full house with many people sitting on the windows behind. It's inspiring to see that there's still passion and interest in ending one of the top infectious killers worldwide. By working together, we can indeed make this possible. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you so much. It's time to end TB.
Moi, je pensais le voir
Let it rock. How are you? Good. Okay. Hi. Hi. Good. Definitely session of that. Yeah, we have another session now. So I knew she was going to walk and I said, go, I'll be I'm right behind that. Thanks.